Hello, welcome everyone to our second webinar of our webinar series about fiscalization in Spain. Today we're going to talk about legal foundation for TicketBAI and Veri, the new fiscalization systems for invoicing in Spain. First of all, I'll introduce myself. I'm Rocío Arqueola, Marketing Manager at Fiscally for the Spanish market. And my colleague is Isabel Nogales. You will remember her from our first webinar. She's our fiscalization expert and business development manager for Spain at Fiscally too. And well, first of all, I want to thank you for being here today. And let's start by sharing the agenda for today's webinar. We will start with a short introduction and understanding of the content of the context of fiscalization in Spain. And we'll delve into the legal framework of TicketBAI and Veri. We'll see the scope, transactions, types of invoices, what the application of the Antifraud law means for POS vendors and for taxpayers. After that, we will explore the key technical requirements, obligations, and compliance considerations for businesses operating in this framework, and the solutions for auditing and record-keeping compliance as well. And at the end, we will answer some of the questions received. So we hope you enjoy this webinar. And let's dive right in, Isabel.
Thank you, Rocío, for the introduction. Well, let's go then with the taxation in Spain. Well, we start with a brief summary of the tax system in Spain. In the previous webinar, we have already advanced what each of the system consists of. But today we are going to go into detail about the legal and technical foundation of each one and the deadline that we must respect to be up to date with the tax legislation in Spain. So with that, we begin. The first will be the Antifraud law. You know that this law was published in Spain in July from 2021 and established the framework of how the software that invoice with the software invoicing and billing must behave. We also have the regulation of TicketBAI in the Basque Country. And then we have Veri that is still pending. We are going to go into detail later. That will affect the rest of Spain. So let's start with a brief also introduction about invoicing type in Spain. So we have two main types of invoices. That will be the simplified invoices and complete invoices. Understanding this invoices type is essential to comply with tax regulation. So let's explore each type in more detail. Simplified invoice, so it's the first one you can see there, are designed for a smaller transaction and specific situations, normally up to 400 euros. It can reach 3,000 euros in some exceptional cases, but this is not very important to mention here. They are commonly used for retail sales when the recipient is not a VAT payer, so it's not a taxpayer, and therefore there is no need to contain information about it. It must include, though, essential details such as the date, description of the goods and services provided, the total amount, the VAT, and breakdown, if applicable in this case. It is mainly used to B2C, so business to consumer, and it's the one that you can find in every bar, restaurant, and retail shops. Then we have the complete invoices. They are more comprehensive and detailed than the simplified invoices. They are required for most of the business-to-business transaction and for also self-employed. They must include complete information about the transaction, including both the supplier and the recipient detail, invoice number, date, description of the goods and services, unit prices, quantities, rates, and all the total amounts. Additional requirements may apply, such as including the tax identification number, that in Spain is called the NIF, and both simplified and complete invoice play a crucial role in tax compliance and record keeping. It's important to understand when to use each type and ensure all mandatory information is included in each of them. So knowing that, there is also a third one that we didn't want to include in this webinar, is the corrective invoice. So every time it can happen a mistake that maybe you issue an invoice by mistake, or it was never received by the supplier. In this case, there is a corrective invoice that can be used by difference or by substitution. This is something we are going to dig a bit more into our next webinar. So try to keep this one just in the frame of the fiscalization. But to give you an overview, that will be useful now to continue with the fiscalization system in Spain. Well, one key regulation we need to consider is TicketBAI, which is the taxation system that will be implemented gradually in the Basque Country, province by province and industry by industry. By December of this year, every self-employed, individual, professional, small, medium, and big company that carry out an economical activity in the Basque Country need to comply with TicketBAI. Another system that is very important will be Veri factu. It's already announced by the state agency of the tax administration. This system specifically applies to companies which tax address is located outside the Basque Country and Navarra. And this will have a specific consideration for Canary Island, Ceuta, and Melilla. It will impact B2B as well as B2C. Here, everything is covered. Paper and electronic invoices, whether they are simplified or complete invoices, and every kind of sales conducted in both physical and online store. It means that e-commerce will be also affected by this regulation. The anti-fraud law, well, as we mentioned, this is the one that is publishing and in place for the whole country. This state what an invoicing software must ensure to comply with the new requirement. There are integrity, conservation, accessibility, traceability of the records, and also need to maintain the legibility in case of the tax administration want us to provide some records. It highlights the requirement of this technology need to be certified by the tax authorities. That means that if you use a software that is not certified or that does not comply partially with Veri factu, then you can face substantial penalties and fine, in this case, both for the taxpayer and for the POS vendor. So here, this is also a key point. Not only the taxpayer will face fines, but also the POS vendor, reaching to also I stay here, 150,000 euros. So as you can see, better to pay attention. And well, the voluntary period started this summer, so it's expected to happen in July. As the technical requirements for Veri factu are not yet published, we cannot confirm this, but the information we have from the authorities is that it's going to be published quite soon, probably at the end of this month or during the next month. So probably the voluntary period can start in this summer. And with this, we also important point for our POS vendors. These dates apply for the taxpayer, but not for the POS vendors. They will need to develop a software that comply with Veri factu if you want to operate in Spain 9 months after the publishing of the technical requirements. This is going to be a ministerial order that we are still waiting, but we can think that maybe around February, you already need to have a software that is compliant with Veri factu. We will inform more about the data as soon as we have it. And with this, we continue. Well, Veri factu, we already talked a bit about it. This is the system that has been announced by the state tax agency, and that refers to the word verificable system, that will be in Spanish, factura verificable. Who is affected? Well, it's applied to the whole territory of Spain. There is some exception for the Basque Country that already have this own legislation, that will be TicketBAI, and for the foral community of Navarra. They will consider also the particularities of the Canary Island, Ceuta and Melilla, some Veri factu rules that are already enforced, and we don't need to wait for Veri factu for that, are very basic ones. They are avoid keeping different accounting method, that means a declare A accounting and the second B one, to avoid totally or partial edition of transaction that can be already carried out, and to avoid altering transaction that have been already recorded. This is the basic frame that is already mandatory from last year, and in addition to the technical requirement. So once published, it will probably be necessary also to go through a certification process to homologate the invoicing software. We know that in TicketBAI this has been the case. You need to register your software, and it's expected to be very similar for Veri factu. Now, let's go to the legal foundation of Veri factu. Well, here, as you can see, there are many points to be considered. First is that how should a Veri factu software work? Well, the software needs to store every single transaction and register every sale. Not only that, also when an employee log in the system, it also needs to be registered when they log in and log out. So every information that can be useful for the tax administration to analyze if any kind of tax fraud has happened. Every invoice must identify also the previous one. This is called the chaining of records for cases of either registration or cancellation. Then we will see in which cases a cancellation of an invoice is allowed in Spain. Then the signing. We need an electronic signature in case that we decided not to send the record in real time. So here's the difference. If the taxpayer decides to send the record in real time, at the moment, it's not going to be necessary to have an electronic signature. If they wanted to do it afterward, then in this case, it's needed. And then we have the next element that will be the sending. Sending the file will be at first voluntary for the taxpayer, but mandatory for the POS vendors to offer this functionality. There is some advantages for the taxpayer to use it to report in real time to the tax authorities. They are not well defined yet. We will also inform you about this. But yeah, at the moment they are establishing that in this first step, voluntary for the taxpayer, mandatory for the software developer. And how does the final invoice look like? Well, the invoice you need to issue to the consumer must contain a QR code and a reference that said if this invoice has been generated using a Veri factu system. This is what we know so far. So we are going to also continue now with the TicketBAI system, and then we will make a small summary. Well, TicketBAI is a system probably you already know a bit better. We have talked about it already in our previous webinar. TicketBAI is different depending on the province, although it's a system that was driven by the 3 different provinces of the Basque Country and the Basque government. Each province has its own legislation and may have slightly differences within each province. So the content of the XML file differs in each province, as do the implementation deadline. We, for example, have the case of Álava, one of the provinces, which an use of TicketBAI software is already mandatory since last year. We have Guipúzcoa that ends the voluntary period this June, and then we have Vizcaya that will end this at the end of this year. It means that by the beginning of next year, the whole Basque Country, the whole business is located in the Basque Country, will need to comply with TicketBAI. Another particular thing about it is that it will coexist with the SII. Maybe you remember from the previous webinar, the SII is the Suministro Inmediato de Información, that will be the immediate supply of information to the tax agency. And it coexists in Álava and Guipúzcoa with TicketBAI, but it replaced in Vizcaya this system. So the SII will be replaced by TicketBAI if you send TicketBAI files together with the ELROE, that will be the Economic Operation Record Book. So yeah, now let's see how TicketBAI affects the sales process. Here we have a graphic that is quite complex, so you will understand that there are many moves inside it. Let's start from the beginning. We have a customer that arrived to our shop, our store, and they want to purchase our product or service. What happened in this case? Well, we registered the transaction in our POS and we sign it and transform it into an XML file. When this happened, we save this information of this XML file and we send it to the tax authorities. This is the part that is carried out on the first step. Then what happened in the tax authorities? They receive the file, they review that everything is okay, and they send it back a validation. They can also be rejections. We are contemplating this in our solution in order to avoid it. In most of the cases, it will be a validation that came back to us. And then our POS, our POS, receive the validation. We already have everything in place, and we can issue then an invoice that is compliant with TicketBAI. It's completely ready. It will have a TicketBAI identifier code as well as a QR code. And finally, we can get this invoice to our customer that now can also scan this code to certify that the whole process was carried out. That means that they can scan the code, it will redirect to the service of tax authorities, and they will be able to see if this transaction was registered, in addition with more information. This is how it works in general terms. Let's go into details. So, first, in order to comply with tax regulation, it is essential for the cash register to establish an internet connection. and connect it to the service of the tax authorities. But classical question, what happens if I lose my internet connection? I'm also compliant in this case. Yes, you are compliant. This is the answer. For the most cases, we at Fiscally take care of that. We will resend all the files when the connection is restored, and this is normal. I mean, it's not going to be a problem when it's more than 2-3 hours, more than a reasonable amount of time. Then we will have to send an email to the authorities telling them, well, I have a problem with my internet connection, and that was the reason because I stopped to send real-time transactions. This is the case at least for Álava and Guipúzcoa. This will not be the case for Vizcaya, since the files there are not sent synchronously. They said now that we are sure that we need internet connection, but some exception will be allowed. Then let's go to the next slide. That will be the creation of the XML file and everything that is related to that. Well, in addition to the registration of an XML file, it's also possible to cancel an invoice issued by the TicketBAI system. For this purpose, a TicketBAI cancellation file must be also generated. Cases for invoicing cancellation can be, for example, and the most typical one, when the invoice has been issued by mistake and is not have yet been delivered to the customer. In this case, they understand you can cancel the invoice, although the normal way when there is some mistake will be the corrective invoice. When the amount wasn't right, the units, we will use another kind of invoices for that. Very important also, the chaining of the records, as we announced already with Veri factu. TicketBAI system implies that each invoice must identify the previous one. This chaining will always be linked to the same taxpayer. And question, how is the first invoice of the year then chained? Well, it will be linked to the last invoice issued in the previous year. And as you know, for secure transaction, you need an signature, an electronic signature that prevents manipulation or deletion of invoices and must be done with a certificate issued by a qualified, trustworthy provider. This is the case that we have. We use the one issued by FEMPE. That is an official certificate that facilitates the signature of the TicketBAI file and that must be sent to our tax agency. Let's go now to the next slide. That will be the list. Well, it's a certification process. Not a completely certification process, but your software needs to be approved by the authorities. So the software must not only comply with the technical requirement, but also need to carry this approval, this homologation from the authorities. It needs to be registered, and it's necessary that the developer needs to send a technical description of the software and a declaration of responsibility that you will keep the system up to date with all the legal requirements and changes that can apply. And this registration is valid for the 3 Basque provinces. We are already registered, the 3 of them, with our API from SignES. And you can use it wherever you are in the Basque country. You are compliant with the whole TicketBAI system. The sending of the file. We have announced a bit how it works. Well, TicketBAI requires this XML file to be sent in real time to Guipúzcoa and Araba and sent within the economic operation record book in Vizcaya. This sending is made according to the province where the taxpayer is registered. This is the key point here. If you are registered in the territory of Vizcaya, you will need to send it according to the Batuz to TicketBAI in Vizcaya. It is in Guipúzcoa the same, and in Álava. It will change a bit depending on where your fiscal address is located. For software developers, well, they need to know that there are different services also for receiving TicketBAI files in test environment and in a production environment. There are also different services related to TicketBAI regulation, but are not contemplated within it. So they can be a bit apart. For example, there is Zuzendu. This is the sending of files that have been rejected or received with validation errors. We'll need to send it back to the authorities once we have solved these errors. And then we have Osatu, that is the sending of additional and complementary information to TicketBAI, which aims to complete the information of the SII. And yep, the sending through Zuzendu or Osatu implies additional technical requirements with new XML files and specific services channels in Álava and Guipúzcoa. Let's continue now with How is the invoice we receive with TicketBAI? Well, the invoice needs to contain a TicketBAI identifier code and a QR code. The TicketBAI identifier contains the taxpayer tax ID, the date, and the signature information. The QR code can be then scanned by the consumer to verify that this transaction was officially registered in the server of the tax authority. And then there are specific positioning requirements need to be also taken into account. For example, that the TicketBAI code should be larger than 30 plus 30 millimeters and less than 40 plus 40. The location also within the invoice is regulated. If we are, well, it will depend on the orientation. If this is a vertical one, they will need to be located at the lowest part of the invoice. If we have an horizontal one, it will be located on the right part of the invoice. And with this information, now let's see how an audit looks like. We have the in-person verification. Well, what does it consist? An invoice and software compliant with TicketBAI must always facilitate a quick validation of the TicketBAI system by the technician from the tax authorities. In case of an audit, the inspection staff will check that the invoicing software is working correctly, no mistake, as they expect it to be, and may request to provide both the TicketBAI files generated in this verification process, as well as those that the taxpayer is obliged to keep. So it's also important to always store your information and your records in case this happens. For storing the information, well, let's go to the next slide that we can provide a bit more information. And here, this reminds that, well, records need to be stored for at least 4 years. At Fiscally, we will keep it for 5 years to ensure that, well, things can happen. Maybe you didn't download it on time, or you need more information. We will ensure always 1 year more. But it's a reminder that the responsibility of storing these files lies with the taxpayer, who must download the information from time to time, in order to have all his record in order. So, you know that Fiscally, our SignES solution is already certified for the 3 provinces of the Basque Country. That means that our partners using our solution will not have to go through any additional certification process to comply with TicketBAI. From the moment our API is implemented, invoices will start to be issued automatically in compliance with the Basque regulation. So we are also very happy to announce that we have been certified. You can use our solution and forget about further formalities, certification, and review of your software. About us, well, I think many of you already know us. For those who don't, we are Fiscally, a leading company in cloud-based fiscalization solution for software developers and retailers. We have offices in Vienna, Berlin, Frankfurt, and now Spain, in Bilbao. And we are proud to say that we work with more than 600,000 point of sales and growing. And our solutions are always and will always be 100% cloud-based, easy to implement. And now, let's see how we can adapt our software to the new legislation in Spain. Our SignES, our API. Well, key point here. The first thing is that you can comply with multiple legislation with just one single API. Our API already includes compliance with TicketBAI in the Basque Country, but we will keep it updated as soon as the draft of Veri factu will be confirmed. We will also develop the solution for Veri factu and for e-invoice regulation and update in our SignES, so that then you can forget about further legislation, as well as in case that's happening in a regional one like Navarra or Canary Island. These cases will be considering our solution, and all of these covered. To facilitate also the sending of the files and to avoid rejections, as we talked before, from the tax authorities, we have developed a complement for the pre-validation of the fields, which will save us some time dealing with errors, file, and resending them to the administrations. Obviously, maintenance, service, updates, all of them are included completely free of charge. You know already how we work. And well, as also our test environment, you can test it for free. You have available the documentation in our developer site from our API. You can test it, get familiar with our system at no cost. We also have a great support team that can help you in 6 different languages if you have any question, as well as all of our amazing account manager that you can reach out. And well, we are almost finishing today's webinar, but I would like in this case to hand over to Rocío that has some additional resources for you.
Yes, that's true. Thank you, Isa, for your amazing presentation. And yes, I want to present our new white paper about fiscal legislations in Spain. This white paper will help you to get a closer look at the current and planned regional and national legislations. And you can download it as a free resource in our website. So if you're interested, please go to fiskaly.com/signes. You will find it there for free, as I said before. And yeah, we're sure that it will answer a lot of your questions. It has a lot of information in there, and it will help you to have a complete overview of what's happening in the Spanish market right now and also what's next. And yeah, talking about questions, we have received a few questions, and we're going to answer some of them now because we don't want to take up too much time of you today. But please remember that every question that you sent us today will be answered personally. And also, if you have further questions, you can write directly, and she will be so glad to help you as soon as possible. So let's go with the questions. I have a good question here, which is, do I need to have a Spanish tax ID or a Spanish entity in order to be compliant with TicketBAI?
Well, that's a very good question because you need it in order to register your software in the Basque Country. But in this case, no, you don't need it because we have been certified already. We have completed the certification process, which means that you don't need to do the same. You can use our ID, for this case, for the signing. And yeah, you don't need to have a Spanish tax ID or open an entity in Spain in order to be certified. When you use our solution, you are covered.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. We have another one here. They said, we already work with you in Germany. Is the implementation process similar to the Spanish one?
Yes. Well, every country, that differ in the data they request from you in order to comply with the new fiscalization law. But it's pretty similar. We design our API always in a very similar way to make it easier for our partner to implement. And particularly for Germany, we have developed a guide that highlights the differences and similarities about SignDE, our solution for Germany, and SignES, our solution for Spain. And you will find, well, what we call a TSS in Germany, how we call it in Spain. So all the things that make you, facilitate you the implementation. And whoever wants it, feel free to just write us an email, and I'm happy to send it over to you.
Perfect. Thank you. We have a classic question here. It is, are we going to be able to watch this webinar again or the presentation? And the answer is yes. You will be able to watch the replay of this webinar in the following days. And well, yes, please remember again that if you have any further questions, you can send them directly to Isa, and we will be super happy to help you.
Exactly. Every question you have or something that maybe wasn't clear in this webinar and you would like to have more specific details, feel free to write us. We are more than happy to help, and yeah, here for you.
All right. Well, but this is the end, and thank you very, very much for attending today's webinar. We really hope you enjoyed it. You learned a lot, and we'll wait for you in the next webinar of our series about fiscalization in Spain. Exactly. The next one will be about invoices and digital receipt. Can you give us a little bit more of information, Isa?
Getting ready, for next month, because we are preparing also a webinar with a different type of invoicing. We already have today an overview of the most common invoices, the simplified and the completed one, but it's important to go also into the corrective one and the different kind that the Spanish legislation is contemplated. So all of this detail, as well as the digital receipt solution, will be discussed in our next webinar. So you are more than welcome to join us, as well as the next one we are preparing also, that will be the technical integration. after this. So we will keep you updated with everything we are preparing for you, and hope to see you there also.
Yes. Thank you very much again. And yeah, see you very soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.